All right, so now you're getting this notice that the meeting is being recorded as of now. Welcome. So we have Steve Wendel here today, joining us from Chicago, and he'll be talking to us about behavioral science. He knows so much about it because he even wrote a book on it, which I think you're going to give us a little run through tonight. So over to you, Steve.
Great. Well, thank you, Maya. So let me just share my screen here. Hey, everybody. So as I mentioned, I'm Steve Wendel. I run the behavioral science team at Morningstar, and that's my day job. And my night job has been trying to build the community of people applying behavioral science. So over the years, I've had the joy of working with many product managers, many designers and others to see what behavioral science means for their work and how particularly we can help users take action. So I thought I'd start with just a practical introduction for those of you who aren't familiar with behavioral science. And then I want to go into what does the process mean? What does it actually mean as a product manager to use this in your work? And we'll go through a set of examples of how it works in practice. And while there is some time for QA at the end, I encourage you not to wait for that. Rather, use, for those of you who are on the Zoom, please feel free to ask questions in the chat window. I will also supply my information at the end if you'd like to reach out or you have additional questions. So again, for those of you who are just joining now, guten Abend alle zusammen. It's a pleasure to speak to you today. And we're going to walk through just a practical introduction of behavioral science in product development. Now, many of you have probably seen the significant number of books that have come out in the field, from Nudge, Predictably Irrational, Thinking Fast and Slow. And often what people get about behavioral science is what I call a bag of tricks, a sense that we have different ways in order to help people take action or even change behavior. And I think that's actually not the best way to think about behavioral science. Instead, I want to show you how a researcher thinks about it, someone who works with product teams every day, and what this means for your practice. And so I like to do this with the example of exercise. Now, I don't know about the German and the Berlin context, but at least in the US, there are many people, many people who get a membership to a gym and then don't quite go, or who have exercise equipment at home and they don't quite use it as often as they expect. Now, again, perhaps this is only an American problem, but my sense is that all around the world, people struggle with this gap between wanting to exercise and actually doing it. Now, this gap does not occur because we think, and I say the we because I suffer from this as well, it doesn't occur because we just really like wasting money. It's not because we want to give money to gyms or give money to shoe companies for running shoes, etc. It's rather that we sincerely desire to go exercise. We know the benefits, we have the motivation, and we even believe that we'll do it, or else we wouldn't keep paying that gym membership, we wouldn't keep that exercise equipment at home, etc. Right? There's something else going on there that isn't about motivation, that isn't about self-confidence, etc. And that's what we study, in particular in my area of behavioral science, that people often have a gap between what they want to do or what they would want to do and what they actually do. And we call this the intention action gap. Not very creative, but at least it's clear. And so this gap occurs everywhere. It occurs in our products. It occurs when we build an awesome feature that no one uses. It occurs when we ask people when we're doing our testing for our new products and saying, will you use this? And they say, yes, absolutely, we'll use this. And then they don't. So we look at why that happens. And most importantly, what you can do about it. So if you take a step back and you think about behavioral science, and particularly applied behavioral science, how we work with product teams, you can think about it as three areas. First of all, we have an understanding of why this gap happens, of how people decide and take action in their daily lives, and why so often we all do things that just doesn't seem completely rational. It doesn't fit what we say. whether that's our users, whether that's ourselves, etc. Second, we have a set of tools to help overcome this, from loss aversion to peer comparisons to framing effects to choice architecture, etc., which are different ways that I'll talk about shortly to help people take action. And then finally, we know that behavior change is extraordinarily difficult. And so we are committed to rigorous testing. Now, that last part is the least interesting, the least sexy, as it were, of behavioral science. And it is also by far the most important, that we understand fundamentally that this stuff is hard, that when you measure any product change, whether it's inspired by behavioral science or not, we rarely move the needle. We hear anecdotes, we hear stories from our users saying how much they love it. But if we actually rigorously measure what happened, in most cases, it's really hard. And that's because the easy stuff has already been done. If we're building a new product, it's to do something different. And different is hard. And so we're going to walk through what this actually looks like in practice. Okay. And again, feel free to ask questions. Let me just actually open up the question window here. See if anybody's come through yet. No, please feel free to ask questions. I know many of you are on the YouTube link and you can't do the interactive questions right now. But again, I'll give you my contact information at the end so you can reach out with your questions. So what does this mean? Now, as Mariella mentioned, I have a book that is actually just came out today in the Kindle edition. And the paper edition will be coming out next week, called Designing for Behavior Change. This is the second edition of the book. And it is a manual for how to do this. It walks through practically how do product managers, how do designers, how do UX folks do this. And as part of that process, as part of writing the book and as part of building up this knowledge, I had the joy of talking with teams all around the world, from Walmart's behavioral science team to the Revenue Service, the tax authority in the US, to academic institutions, to health groups, to groups in South Africa and Mexico and Peru, etc. And what we find is that we have a somewhat common process. And so what I'm sharing, I want to be very clear. It's the process itself isn't mine. It is rather our communities. It is how applied behavioral scientists have figured out how to do this stuff. In my book and the writings, I help describe this, I distill that, but I'm not unique here. This is how all of us at Walmart, et cetera, have come together to apply behavioral science in a thoughtful way. And these are actually some of the different models. We use different terms, but in the end, we're all doing a problem solving. And so this is how you think about it when you're developing a product, when you're developing a new feature, or whether you're looking to update an existing feature and understand why people aren't, excuse me, taking action in your product. And we think about it first and foremost as, well, what's the behavioral problem? What is the environment around them that may cause this problem, right? How do we craft an intervention? How do we use those set of tools that I mentioned? How do we build that solution practically with our teams? How do we check the ethical guidelines and whether we're doing something thoughtful for our users? And then how do we measure impact and evaluate what's next? I use the acronym DECIDE for this, define, explore, craft, etc. But what really matters is the tools themselves, what we do at each step of the way. You can take these tools and wrap them into your existing process. In the first edition, I talked a lot about how you can do this in an agile framework, how you can do this in a lean startup framework, etc. But you can do this, you can apply these tools in your own work, even if the overall acronym or framework doesn't work for you. Now, I'll have time to go through some of these techniques today, but I also wanted to point to you a free write-up that I've made that goes in this in much more detail, that talks about each of these tools, etc. It's a workbook you can find at behavioraltechnology.co, and it's free for download, no strings there. And you'll see all of the techniques that I'm talking about today, plus many more. Okay. So let's look through some of those techniques. Now, again, I love to use the example of exercise because so many of us struggle with that. And so what would move this guy from sitting on his couch, watching TV, watching Netflix, whatever it might be, to actually getting up and exercise? Let's say you're developing an app that encourages exercise. Well, first, let's figure out what it is exactly we want to accomplish. Let's say you've got a salesperson who says, I think you guys can really build this app. Well, that's nice. That's not enough. Now, as a product manager, of course, you'll have your own method for writing out the functional guidelines, the spec of what you want. From a behavioral perspective, what we need, what you add to that normal design brief or functional spec, is a specific behavioral statement, which centers around three concepts: the actor, the action, and the outcome. Who specifically are you trying to help? Because one of the core lessons in behavioral science is that different people in different contexts have different obstacles. There are no behavioral solutions in general. There is nothing that says, boom, do this and everybody will exercise. It doesn't work that way. It's a user-centered approach where we have to understand, who are we serving, the specific group. So let's say it's sedentary white-collar workers, maybe myself. And what you want to do is you want to help them say, start going to the gym, right? That's the action. Then we want to look at the outcome. Why does it matter to them? It matters to you because, of course, you want your product to be successful. And great, that's wonderful. Your users don't care. From a behavioral perspective, what is it that shows their motivation? What is it that they will get out of this? And without that, you only have coercion. You don't have behavior change. And so here, let's say it's joint pain. And actually, this is a personal example. I've struggled with this. That's why I'm, in fact, standing right now rather than sitting at my desk. Is it helps to relieve that joint pain and help do that exercise, right? So let's say this is what you want to help people with. Often a side benefit might be losing weight, etc. And so we think of this as the behavioral problem in a broader suite of a product brief. So skipping ahead, again, there's other steps that we might take there, but I just want to kind of give you the highlights. How do you understand the context? How do you understand what's going on that stops this person from taking action, from using your application, from going and exercising, right? Another one of the lessons of behavioral science is that not only are there no behavior change in general, like it depends on the particular person, it depends deeply on the circumstance. And so we map out, what are the micro behaviors? Where is somebody starting from? And what's the sequence of actions that someone would need to take in order to go exercise, right? What happens between someone sitting at home and going to the gym? I use the framework CREATE to think about these obstacles. Actually, let me just walk through some of the steps first, and then we'll talk about CREATE. I think that might be a little easier for new folks. So let's say somebody's sitting on their couch. What happens? What are all the steps, those micro behaviors? Well, they have to start thinking about going to the gym, right? They have to think about exercise. If you're watching Netflix, if you're deep into a show, the biggest obstacle that this user faces, and many users face, is simply attention. What gets them started? Then it's a question of, okay, well, they probably have to have a gym membership. They have to have the app on their phone, right? Or they have to have an email that helps them get the app on their phone. They have to open the app. They have to perhaps schedule a time. Let's say it helps people with a trainer, right? They have to schedule a time. They have to have their gym shoes. They have to have their gym clothes. They have to have a block of time open in order to go. They have to have a way to transport themselves to the gym. They have to know where it is, etc. Long list of actions that people need to take and constraints that are on a person. And we could think of many, many more, right? This is just an example. Often what we find when we map out the micro behaviors is that this thing that we want people to do, go to the gym using our app, right? Use our app and that leads you to the gym and an exercise routine. Or open up this new feature in our B2B software that helps people do accounting more effectively. When we map out the micro behaviors, we realize just how complex this really is. How many steps are required? And so that's a key lesson, is that what we think of as simple is often tremendously complicated for someone who hasn't done it before. And this behavioral map helps us do that. Now, once we have that behavioral map, then we can start looking at, in each step, what's going on. Why might someone not take action? So let's go back to our friend at the friend who's sitting on the couch, right? I mentioned this attention. That is often our biggest barrier. If you look across the behavioral literature, that's one of the 6 major obstacles that people face to taking action in the moment. And you can remember them with CREATE. Cue, reaction, evaluation, ability, timing, and experience. The cue is the thing that first gets somebody thinking about whether they take the action or not. Because again, our biggest obstacle is usually attention. They're playing with their kids, they're watching Netflix, etc. Now, once somebody's attention is on the action, then it's a question of the emotional reaction, the intuitive reaction. This is not a conscious cost benefit. Oh, this product is awesome, I should go use it. Instead, it's, how does that make me feel? Okay, there's this app that wants me to go to the gym. Oh, I look terrible in gym shorts. I don't want to go. That's an emotional reaction that hits before somebody thinks about their own benefits, how it might help them. And so many of your users will be lost because of that negative reaction, regardless of the value proposition, regardless of what you're offering to them. And again, this happens before a cost-benefit analysis. It's a faster mechanism in the brain. Then we look at the cost-benefit analysis, and there's a lot of literature in behavioral science on how this is not a spreadsheet. Our minds don't do spreadsheets. Instead, there are ways that we warp the cost and benefits. Some of them loom larger in our heads than others, right? That we focus on particular aspects. We focus on the near term rather than long term. And we have techniques we'll talk about shortly to help with that. We look at questions of ability. Can someone take action? Do they have the self-efficacy to do so? We look at timing. Is this the right timing? Or were they procrastinate? I don't know. I can't say in the German context, but I can say in the American context, procrastination is something we all suffer from. Maybe you guys have heard, but we are. And then finally, the overriding power of past experience, that if someone has been burned in the past, if they've tried this before and it's been a bad experience for them, it's very difficult to bring people back. And so when we look at those 6 questions at each one of the micro behaviors, effectively that gives us a diagnosis of the problem in a product. Why people don't take action. It's at this moment, at this particular micro action, and for this reason. So let's say it is getting the gym clothes, and it is because of an emotional reaction. That's what we need to work on. It helps you focus your energies on a specific challenge. And then once you have that specific challenge that you want to address, we have a tremendous set of tools that we can use to help you in that moment. Again, I can't go through all of it today. I do 6-hour trainings on this stuff, but I want to give you an introduction. And again, I have a free workbook that you can access. So we have tools for how to bring attention to the problem, if cue is the problem, to addressing the emotional reaction, etc. Let me just walk you through a few. We also have them for when we're looking to stop a behavior like smoking. Smoking, we've learned, is largely a habitual problem, not as much of a problem of nicotine, but rather the habit of smoking. And we have techniques that can help address negative behaviors as well. So let's look, for example, at a cue. Some of the techniques you can use. One of the key ones is that we look to align with people's time rather than simply to yell at them, rather than to simply tell them, hey, you should be paying attention. So this is a study I ran with one of the largest employers in the world, large minimum wage population. And we found that for them, it didn't matter so much what we said. It mattered when they had time to listen, right? And this is knowing your users. In this case, it was Saturday and Sunday. Many of these folks were working 2 jobs. We ran this with a large manufacturing population, and we found completely different. That for them, it was Tuesday, right? And we find across the studies that one of the single most important factors is mere attention. When do people have the bandwidth to spare? For reaction, for example, there have been lots of studies on peer comparisons, on how we compare people to others, and that hits us in an emotional and intuitive way. That when we see, for example, that our neighbors are more energy efficient than we are, that motivates action. There's a study I ran on the left, which has to do with finances. When you see that our neighbors or people around us are saving more money, well, then the competition becomes about saving rather than about the fanciness of our clothes or of our car, etc. And again, it helps motivate action. When we look, evaluation, as I said, this is it's not a spreadsheet. There are some things that we want to do right now but they're just not all that urgent. And so we don't push them right now. This on the screen is an example from temptation bundling. It's a technique that Katie Milkman and others used. In fact, in the context of going to a gym. They knew that people wanted to exercise, but it just wasn't that urgent. And so they, it wasn't something that right now they were thinking about, hey, this is my activity. And so they bundled together something people really wanted, which was to listen to this audiobook. In this case, when they ran it, it was The Hunger Games. And the only way they could listen to the audiobook was at the gym, because they locked it in the locker and said, this thing's free, go ahead and use it. You can listen to it, but it's in the gym and you can't take it out, which is a very effective way to combine, as they say, a want and a should. Okay, and thank you for the questions. Keep bringing them in. This is an example of just a simple marketing campaign we ran, where for many people, when you see a box that says, do you want our information? They say no, immediately, quick reaction. But if you slow them down, right, and you make it, for example, what are the things you'd like? We had a 300% lift just by slowing people down, not by forcing them into anything, but getting them to think, oh, okay, yeah, I actually would like this information. I wouldn't like this thing. Giving control to people and avoiding that immediate emotional reaction, making it a cost, making it a conscious matter, was tremendously effective for them and for us. There are many other techniques that I mentioned that address other obstacles. For the sake of time, I'm going to skip those. And I just wanted to address one part that is spend a significant time both in the book and in the workbook, which is the ethics. And after we've chosen that intervention, we have to ask, are we helping our users? Or are we merely helping ourselves? There's nothing wrong with growing a successful business. There's nothing wrong with building a good product. In addition to that, we should be looking, are we tricking people? Are we hurting them? Now, these are concerns, of course, that face all product managers everywhere. But what behavioral science has to offer is not the problem. We all have this problem, but rather a set of techniques that can help solve it. There is a body of literature specifically on ethical behavior and what makes us ethical or not. And I do say the we, because we all struggle with this. So Dan Ariely's book, for example, and again, you'll find some guidelines in the workbook on how we can apply behavioral science to ourselves so that we don't stray, so that we don't do something that we later regret. Now, again, there's a tremendous richness to this field. There's so much I could talk about. What I wanted to do today was give you a practical introduction to help show you the framework that many of us in the field have come together on, from Walmart to Morningstar to Revenue Service, et cetera, all around the world. And then give you some examples of these techniques in practice and how it might fit into your product management. I can't do it all today. As I mentioned, there's a guide that accompanies this talk, which is free, and I hope you do check it out. You can find it at behavioraltechnology.co. And with that, I just wanted to thank you for your time. I believe I'm at 20 minutes, right? And we have a bit of time for Q&A. So thank you. And I hope this was useful for you. Please feel free. Oh, actually, I should say on behavioraltechnology.co, you can also reach out to me if you have any questions or is anything I can help you with after this session as well. Mariella?
Thanks a lot,
I think
Steve.
you're on mute. There we go.
Yes, unmuted okay. Just in time. So we have a question from Florine. Mm-hmm. Do you want me to read it out? How did
okay, let me see. Yes, I will have to read it. So excuse me as I stare at the screen for a second. And other folks, please feel free to ask questions as well. Yep. Okay. So B2B products, very common question. In fact, I work in B2B. Most of our work is this. Okay. And so in a B2B context, we think it depends which problem you're trying to solve in a B2B context, right? If your product is already at your customers' sites, right, and they have users and they're not using it very much, well, then the actor you focus on is generally the end user. If it is a question of uptake, you have something that helps people, right? We're not trying to push bad product, but you have something that that helps people, and they aren't engaging, you're not sure. Then the actor in that case is often the buyer at the company, and say, what problems are they trying to solve? What is important to them? Why does this matter for them? for example, the productivity of their employees. So yes, we use that in both contexts. And in some cases, you actually have a two-step where you have both. And then yes, I break apart the actor from the user. Yeah, I have that in the workbook as well. It's one of the more advanced tools where you talk about each of those individually. So again, this is my own experience. This is what we do quite often. Okay, where as you said, the B2B customer may be interested in improving and automating and being more efficient, and the user cares about the user experience. The answer is, well, you got to do both, right? But the framework can help you kind of break that apart and see the particular needs and obstacles that each group is facing. Okay. How are we doing on time? Well,
we still have time, so if anyone wants to write or ask a question, oh, we have one.
Yep. Okay.
That was fast.
Okay, sure. So this question is around how do you apply this to a manufacturing history and factory floor where behaviors have to be molded or coerced to achieve efficiency? And the answer is I wouldn't. I know that's probably not the answer you're looking for. I don't want to coerce people. Instead, often I think we can find where is the win for both the company and for the individual? How does this benefit them? If we're doing something that we aren't comfortable talking about, right? If not comfortable saying, look, we're doing this, and we feel that we're coercing people, we are coercing people, that's a big warning sign. And there are in fact many ethical challenges in the field because of this. So I would look first and foremost, what do the factory workers want, and how can you help them achieve that? How can they become part of the creating a great product and feel proud of that? And this is a step along that path. I find coercion is often something we reach for, but it's when we're not creative enough. I don't have the time to really do proper user research and understand how can we align the needs of the company, of the product, or the team building it, and the users. So I wouldn't use this framework.
Thanks a lot, Steve. We could have time for another question.
Yep. Right, there's another one. Okay. Just wanted to ask the principle of reciprocity from Cialdini, maybe bypass some of the elements that are needed to nudge. Yeah, so reciprocity and Cialdini's work is tremendously important. And yes, it is quite powerful. The way we think about it is reciprocity is a particular social and in some cases cost benefit, but primarily social mechanism, okay, that hits on that reaction step, okay? If we, what often happens in behavioral science and applied behavioral science is folks will take a look at a particular guidebook, right? Cialdini's influence, and say, great, I'm going to go use reciprocity. I'm going to go use the foot in the door technique, etc. And these techniques are very effective, but only when they're addressing the right problem. And so the framework, what we found in behavioral science is we want to identify the specific obstacle people are facing. If the obstacle is attention, for example, they love what you're doing, right? They feel indebted to you, but their thoughts are on their work that they need to complete right now, and they're just not even thinking about your product, etc. Reciprocity is irrelevant. When the problem is social, when the problem is that reaction, reciprocity is very powerful. So reciprocity is one of the techniques that fit under that reaction step. I hope that makes sense for you, Santiago. I hope that helps. So this is part of the framework. The idea is you only need to do often one intervention, but it's the intervention that matches the particular behavioral obstacle. Sometimes that intervention is reciprocity, right? Sometimes it's something else. It just depends on the particular user need and challenge they're facing. Okay. Great. So thank you very much. I want to make sure that we give time to Ben. So thanks you all for having me. Feel free to reach out through the website. You can contact me, send me other questions you might have. Happy to help if I can.
Cool. And if you'd like, Steve, you can also put the link in the chat here so people just can easier click on it.
Sure, no problem.
Or otherwise it's behavioraltechnology.co.
No, indeed. I was just thinking for the folks on the YouTube link, that won't be very helpful, but I will put it in here anyway. There you go. that's it. And if, by the way, it does also, the British spelling also works, behavioral with EU. So both of them.
Clever.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks a lot. See you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Steve. All right. To not lose momentum, we could head over to Ben, who's our second speaker for the evening. And then for the people on Zoom, we can do the breakout session towards the end, as it seems like the YouTube participation is half-half. So there were fewer people who wanted to interact with the group today on Zoom, or maybe didn't have time to join. So I would say we head over to Ben directly. Your screen sharing is working.
Yes, awesome.
Great.
Yeah, hi everybody. Excited to be with you tonight. Maybe let me quickly just like introduce myself. I'm Ben. I came to beautiful Berlin a little bit over five years ago. Previously worked in Dublin, worked at Nike in Amsterdam, then joined Zalando here in Berlin. I held different roles throughout my career, but towards the end I was responsible for building up the digital B2B side. That means like a business platform that allowed all commercial stakeholders outside tech to interact with Zalando's digital premises, upload contents, run campaigns, and so forth. After Zalando, I left to like found my own company in the food tech space, which is like connected to like a deep personal passion of mine, which, as these things go sometimes, hasn't been the great success. Otherwise, I would have been introduced as the founder of X tonight. And then in February decided, as Corona was not there yet, decided to join a travel tech company, run their Berlin office, and help them conquer the Central Eastern European market. So it's been quite an interesting time. But let's get back to product. Yeah. So let me actually start with oh no, the clicker isn't working. Yeah. Let me start with actually making a confession, right? I have never worked as a product manager. So I've shipped products, I've managed product managers. So you're asking probably, so why am I mentioning this, or you're asking like, why am I even talking at a product meetup? It's because something I have observed in the field that is bothering me, and this is something I want to talk about that's very dear and near to me. It is that product management really often, and in most of the companies I've seen, is really confined to, say, like the technical digital space, right? Like if you look at, I don't know, job ads on LinkedIn, or also, I mean, all the companies I've seen, the product managers were those that working on whatever the digital product was, working with the engineers, defining like what they build and ship that. I would argue, though, that actually is a much too narrow description. It actually causes a whole host of problems. For one, if you're defining product that narrow, if we define product that narrow, it's not just like someone out there. It seems to be commonly shared. You're actually missing out a lot of opportunities to apply like product management principles to areas outside of the product that might actually really benefit from that. Also, if you're having this too narrow view that many bigger organizations have, it really creates silos between product and between other commercial teams that are usually involved in shipping a product, like sales, customer success, marketing, and so forth. And these challenges usually bubble up, and I have really observed them firsthand, or like and felt the pain firsthand in your stakeholder management, when you need to work together with those stakeholders outside the technical sphere. Lastly, I think it also really creates an unnecessary high barrier of entry. I know firsthand of several young, talented people that are trying to break into product, right, and don't really seem to get an in there because they're currently working in sales or in marketing or in business development. And often like the feedback is like, no, you need product experience, you need product experience, you need product experience. Whereas I would argue, and I'm going to argue here as well, that actually you can gain product experience outside product. And the way we define product is to narrow in any event. So which bears obviously the question, how else can we define product if not like the person working with engineering and defining like what we should build? Well, let's look another example, and this is from one of my previous employers. This is actually the mission statement of Nike. It's a quote from their founder, Bill Bowerman. So they're saying like, mission of Nike is to bring inspiration and innovation to every athlete in the world. Oh, but wait, there's this asterisk. What does that say? So it says actually, if you have a body, you are an athlete. So what I really like about that, you know, like they're saying like we're serving athletes, obviously, but they're applying at the same time this very broad and inclusive definition of who is an athlete, which is everybody who has a body, which is pretty much everyone. So back to product. How does it actually translate here? This is a quote from one of my favorite articles by Marty Kagan, right? Called "Behind Every Great Product," and he argues that behind every great product there is someone acting as a product manager. Usually they have the title, sometimes they're the CEO, but the point is that it is not important what the title of the work is. It is important that you do the work. So a product manager is whoever does product work. And I would like to add to that a product can be many things, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be digital. So if it's people working on a product that doesn't have to be digital, suddenly we're actually looking at a situation where we have a lot more people out there who are product managers. Some of them might not even know, or most of them might not even know that they are product managers or doing product work. But I mean, actually benefit from like being included in this community and also benefiting from adopting a lot of the product principles, or like the principles for good product management that are being discussed and are being developed in the whole community. So I'm having troubles with my clicker here. It's not, come on. Yeah. So who should actually care about that, right? That we're defining it too narrow and so on. I think really this is important to quite a lot of people. So if you are listening right now, you're a product person, you're working in product, and you want to increase your impact working with your stakeholders and like the remit, and want to improve the performance of your products, you should listen to this. Also aspiring product managers, everybody who wants to break into product, but doesn't really seem to get an in because they're not yet part of this these elusive guild, as well as anyone outside product who really wants to adopt some of the principles we're using, and wants to learn how to in the end like improve processes, improve systems, improve teams. So how does product work outside traditional product, outside tech? Well, it works, quite honestly, same it works inside product, by applying like some of the same principles we have that help us build great digital products. And I mean, this is only like top of my mind. This is by no means exhaustive, but if you'd ask me in a heartbeat, you know, like what good product management looks like, what kind of principles we follow, those are like the top ones that come to mind. And they come in a lot of different shapes, but in the end it gets down to, you know, like working iterative, working in an agile fashion, not doing like waterfall, working hypotheses driven, being customer centric, emphasizing with your customers, analyzing like what are their jobs to be done, what do they want to achieve, how might we help them, and being like outcome focused as opposed to output focused, right? You know, there's a lot of these, whether it's build, measure, learn, think, make, check. There's like so many of these frameworks out there. In the end, they're all like aiming towards the same. So if that is product in a nutshell, how could we apply these to some realms outside product that it's typically not applied? So the first example I wanna give is really that of like soft versus hard product. Right, and I mean, I've experienced that firsthand. Usually, product in a traditional sense is confined to, you know, like building the technical infrastructure, building the app, building the tooling, building the whatever is that, you know, like is driven by code, is driven by tech. However, in bringing that to market, launching that, there are usually a lot of other factors driving success or failure of your product that should be considered, that are usually typically not in the realm or in the remit of a product manager. Think on pricing, think on branding, think on like training and enablement. If you're having if you're having a B2B product, right? All of these in the end drive the same metrics that you measure your success by. Like, is it an adoption, like what you enable with the customer, whichever KPIs you drive. So why wouldn't you apply the same principles that you apply to, you know, like, should we, how is the user flow gonna be? Like, should we add this feature or not? Like, where you in the end like do user research and you do testing and so forth, and you work iteratively and you measure the success. Why shouldn't all of that be applied to branding, pricing, training, and enablement, and so forth? Which, in my observation, it most often is not. At Zalando, in my previous role, I was lucky enough to really own the digital platform that we're building end to end, which means I was responsible for both building the technical part, but also rolling it out, maintaining it, operating it. So, and we really treated this end to end, and this really helped us become successful, I think, tremendously. And oftentimes these non-technical aspects of your products, these soft products, I have learned have an even greater impact on your outcomes than some feature decisions that you might spend more time at if you're a product manager. A last note here, because not in the very few setups will be that you really have end-to-end ownership, right? Like usually you partner with you have to partner with marketing or with like commercial departments outside of product for these aspects of your product. The investments you make in partnering and educating those and onboarding them to like your way of thinking in your stakeholders, they will pay out like more than 10x. That will make your stakeholder management so much easier down the road, because these people really start to understand like why it is so hard, for example, to put out like a definitive roadmap like 1 year out and saying like when which feature drop, right? You won't have these discussions anymore, because they understand like how you work off customer insights, work off a vision, build hypotheses, and work in iterations. So the next one is team as a product, right? There is really great talk by the Asana co-founder, Asana, which was or like still is supposed to have like the best culture in tech, at least that's what you read. You can Google it or you can search it on YouTube. It's culture as a product, where in the end he talks about, you know, like applying the same principles I just talked about to their culture. But even on a like culture on a few levels down, in your team, and this really applies to pretty much everyone out there, you can apply that, right? Like whether it's, you know, like which rituals, like are you going to do stand-ups, are you, I don't know, going to do Friday after work drinks, like what are your processes, how are you running meetings, and so forth. You can really apply that. You can identify pain points, challenges, ideate around solutions, deploy, build hypotheses around these solutions, roll them out, test them, and iterate, right? And most often, in my observation, this just isn't done. Like, you know, something pops up in a team context, you're trying to patch it, and then just forget about it until like someone complains about it, then you start the process again. But we're working so much in teams and so much in meetings, so like why not apply like product thinking to that to really like raise the bar here as well. The other one is, and this is more close to like the sphere I'm working in right now, is process as a product, right? I'm managing a region. I have a lot of like different market managers reporting to me. They're all working in like one way or another in sort of a sales funnel. So here you can apply product thinking as well, right? Like you map out your process, your sales funnel. You know, you analyze where do opportunities for improvement lie. Is it top of funnel? Is it bottom of funnel? What do we know? What are our hypotheses? Why it is not working there? What could be potential solutions? Let's ideate them. Let's compare them. Let's roll them out, test them, and then learn from it and go again. Obviously, you need proper metrics and insight in order to do that as well. So those are really just like three examples. I really think I could have gone on and on and on and on and on. There's also even more examples. There's a great article by Jeff Gothelf, like the Lean UX author, who I know also was actually on this meetup like a month back, or a while back anyway. He also has an article about that. He in the end makes a very, very similar point in like which products do human resources, do finance, do legal produce, right? So product is so much bigger than we usually think. And there's so much opportunity as well from teams outside like this very narrow product community to benefit from all the great things, whether it's like applying behavioral methods or like how to work with users that they can benefit from. That was it. Thanks. Oh, there's one more. A talk can also be a product, right? And in the spirit of learning and feedback, there's a QR code. So if you would be so kind to really just like spare 10 to 20 seconds, pull out your smartphone, open your camera app, point it at the screen, a link will open. So there's like a very, very quick feedback form where you can just like let me know whether what you just heard like resonated with you, whether that was helpful, what could be improved. Thanks so much.
Good move on the QR code.
Does it work for you?
And we have also a few questions.
Yes, please. Oh, wait, should I open the...
Yes, in the chat. I think it's easier if you read them.
Wait. I don't quite find my... Oh, no, here. No, can you read them out? I don't get it right now in the chat.
Absolutely. Just a second.
Ah, no, here I have it.
Okay. So at 7:04, you can look from that point beyond. And the first comment is from Florian.
Okay. There are product managers without a tech background, and that is many times an advantage for the organization. Perhaps the reason the product manager title role didn't spread to all industries is because it is a role that gradually evolved, and just in the last 10 years, it took shape. There's much more documentation, communities, knowledge, etc. about this now. It's true that for digital product software, this was evolved faster, and there's some companies became so good that they have higher expectations on the role who could take it. Yeah, no, I mean those are all fair, all absolutely fair points. I mean, it's also I also know a lot of like commercial organizations have a lot more or undertake a lot more efforts to become like agile and drive experimentation and drive a lot of different aspects to that. Like my point really is more like we should, and this is something like I have observed, and I mean I'd also love to hear from the community here, like whether that resonates, that some product managers, some product communities and some companies I've worked, they were a little bit like elitist, right? Like if you're not like in product, like we don't, yeah, no, you don't get this, like we keeping to ourselves. So this is really what I'm arguing against. Zalando did make some efforts actually at some point to also introduce product managers in departments outside digital. So they had like product managers for some HR products and stuff like that. They were still working on technical, but they were really like embedded in HR or in finance and were driving some product efforts there. Mirella, in some companies like Pitch, they have a pricing product manager. Well, yeah, Pitch is
that was a comment to your slide that pricing can be your product. So I noticed in companies that this can also be a function. Sometimes it's the product monetization function, or in companies that have a big checkout integration across many markets, you would have even a PM for cards or even a PM for all the payment methods, and sometimes even with just a few countries or a few payment type as their scope of work.
Yeah. No, it's a great example. Obviously, like Pitch is definitely a company that is very very progressive. I mean, there is also product managers outside tech, like in the more FMCG realm, right? Like like Unilever or stuff like that. They have product manager for
maybe for the audience.
Sorry.
For the audience who is not Ben and knowing all the acronyms.
Fast-moving consumer goods. Sorry, like
yes.
Unilever. So like for deodorant, margarine, and some of their products, but they're working a lot quite different to like how technical product management is on, like what we understand of product management if we talk about it. Let's see, there's also quite many companies that have a narrow view of the product manager role. If you are not technical enough, then you are not considered. Product management is so much more than this and sits at the intersection of tech business and UX. Yeah, no, definitely agree. And there's a question. Ben, who would you say is responsible for the delivery implementation of the product solution for a customer? It depends, right? It depends how product is defined. If you ask me, what would be an ideal setup, right? Is if you as a product manager, if you're really end-to-end responsible, you like the mini CEO of your product, and that means you also own implementation, as I've argued. You know, like that all drives your drives the results you're responsible for. I'm not a fan of like this hand-off culture. That obviously also still exists out there, right? There are also product managers with like a very narrow like realm that they can operate in, like also on the technical side, that have like very strong commercial stakeholders in the end, or like very sales-driven organizations that, you know, like, this is what we sold to the customer, these are the requirements, and you as a product manager, your job in the end is to be like the product owner in a Scrum team and like feed this to the engineering team and make them productive. That also exists out there. But I think like, and this also goes back to Marty Cagan, like behind every great product, like a product that is really good and winning out there is really a product manager who makes all that decisions, and he makes the decisions about everything that is in the end like adding value at the user side, is solving a problem for them. And that includes like, how does the technical infrastructure look, but also includes, you know, like, how do we ship it out there? What is the pricing? What is the packaging, and so forth? Thanks a lot. Okay, I recommend every product manager in the job interview to ask what the company defines as your product. That's a good point. Here you can differentiate internal and external product, as well as, for example, service processes, advisory processes, internal software like CRM systems or digital solutions for customers. Otherwise, there is the risk that you are responsible for all kinds of products, because all say this is also a product. Yeah, it's a really good point.
Cool. More questions? Or are people done with questions and we can jump into the breakout rooms?
Yay, I'm gonna stop sharing then.
All right. So then this will be the end of our live streaming for people watching us on YouTube. Join us next week, where we'll have Rochelle from Klarna talking about product strategy. And right now I'll stop broadcasting, and for the people in the Zoom meeting, we're going to create a breakout room and mimic an in-person socialization.